To all of our participants, once again, thank you very much for joining our program today. We are delighted to have you and engage in this very informative and timely program. In regards to questions that you may have for our panelists during the Q&A session, please send your questions to the program host. Please provide your name and the current city you are currently located, and make sure your question is within the topic of discussion and very brief. That being said, now I want to take the opportunity to welcome our first speaker, Ms. Martine Zeuthen. And I am so sorry if I totally butchered your name, but you'll have a chance to correct me. Martine is a senior research fellow in the Terrorism and Conflict Program at RUSI. She is based in Nairobi, Kenya, and set up RUSI's operation in East Africa. She focuses on extremism and radicalization, countering violent extremism, program management, research, and methodology. Prior to working for RUSI, she worked in a consulting firm specializing in data collection and evaluation of CVE-related programs in conflict-affected states. Martine lived and worked in Syria during the first years of her career. She is a Danish anthropologist and currently studying a PhD in crime security studies at UCL. Martine is leading the CVE work in East Africa, and she has led the Strengthening Resilience to Violent Extremism in the Horn of Africa, STRIVE program, and the follow-on STRIVE second edition, as well as many other research-based CVE programs in the Horn of Africa. Martine is responsible for designing and overseeing an implementation of research for all RUSI CVE work in the region, which involves managing highly complex network of stakeholders, including law enforcement, government ministries, civil society, religious groups, and research organizations. Martine, welcome, and the stage is yours.
Thank you so much, Mohamed. Thank you for that elaborate introduction, but also thank you so much for organizing this meeting. I'm really, really sincerely honored to be on a panel with such distinguished speakers. And I want to thank ACTRI for this kind of opportunity and for engaging in this important conversation at this time. I've been asked to focus on violent extremism and terrorism prevention, and because of the context in Somalia, I will mainly focus my conversation around disengagement from Al-Shabaab, and as a part of that, discuss communication activities specifically, as well as kind of elaborate on what is the international community's role as a part of those issues. And I think you have explained why I'm on this panel, but just in short, I've been working on CVE in the Horn of Africa and Somalia for the last, 6 years, since 2014 for RUSI, a British defense and security think tank. But more recently, I'm in an independent capacity involved directly in disengagement programs in Somalia. So if I start out by talking a bit about CVE and terrorism prevention in Somalia, I think it's worth saying that within the CVE space and in the terrorism prevention literature, we mostly focus on relatively stable environments. So it's not very elaborate or articulate what do we actually mean with prevention in a context where armed conflict is ongoing. And from that perspective, I would argue that there's so many programs, in particular in southern Somalia, in the areas closer to where Al-Shabaab is in control, that all contribute to CVE, meaning that they are contributing to addressing some of the structural issues that Al-Shabaab might manipulate when they're trying to recruit young people, such as, poverty, lack of access to education, lack of opportunities to youth, poor governance, and so on. So from that perspective, I would really argue that in Somalia, where armed conflict is ongoing, development, stabilization, perhaps even at times humanitarian programs are contributing to terrorism prevention in one sense or the other. What is really CVE programs, it's when it gets a little bit more specific, when it's youth engagement that are trying to engage youth that could have been at risk of joining Al-Shabaab, or civic education, or perhaps reconciliation programs between some of the groups that experience marginalization. But what I think is really unique for Somalia, and where we across the East African region can learn a lot from Somalia, is the specific experience with disengagement programs, because it's so particular, because we have quite a number of years of experience now, and because, you know, there's been developed a very particular kind of Somali approach to disengagement. So I thought I would structure my notes on disengagement around the National Rehabilitation Program, because it's such a clear strategy and it has 5 strong pillars. To those of you who are not familiar, it's the outreach pillar, the reception pillar, the screening pillar, the rehabilitation pillar, and the reintegration pillar. And if I start with outreach, of course, the objective with outreach is to encourage defection from Al-Shabaab and to discredit Al-Shabaab as an organization. And here, communication activities are really essential. And here, international organizations with strong expertise in counter-messaging have played a key role. They have led programs on radio, on TV, there has been leaflet drops, and like any kind of communication initiatives. I'll get back to that in a little bit. But another key part of the outreach pillar is, of course, to raise the awareness with the National Army and with AMISOM and with other government actors, who are the people who are receiving individuals who are defecting at the front lines. They need to know how to manage this situation. So again, here, the international community has played a key role in supporting the capacity around managing this process. So once a defector has defected, he or she comes to a reception situation, which is the second pillar, as I just mentioned. And what is important about the reception is, of course, that that the individual is treated in a way that's consistent with safety and security, and his or her fundamental rights are protected. And that's really what is outlined in the strategy. And then what happens is that the specific individual, whether it's from the army or AMISOM or government actors, they transfer this individual into NISA custody very quickly, because NISA is key in the next pillar, which is the screening phase. NISA, they do interviews and do screenings according to very kind of strict screening tools, and they assess whether the individual is low risk or high risk. The high risk individuals are then, you know, it might be possible to establish a case against them, so they're going to the military courts. And the low risk guys are the ones who are encouraged they join rehabilitation programs. They are voluntary, of course, so that's why I'm saying they're encouraged to. And again, the role that the international community has played here is to contribute to developing the tools, kind of the SOPs for managing this process, and also to support the NISA officers who are leading this work. And most recently, a lot of work have been done around developing screening tools for women specifically, because it's become a part of the conversation, you know, how we manage female members of Al-Shabaab, and also perhaps wives of Al-Shabaab members. That brings us to this fourth pillar, and that's the rehabilitation pillar. So that's, of course, kind of the key part of a disengagement process. And what is set out in the strategy is kind of the standards for the rehabilitation across all of the centers, with the aim to have, you know, kind of one approach. Even if there's some variance between the programs, there's still some standards. And currently there are 4 centers in Somalia, and there's conversations going on around establishing a specific center for women. So that's very encouraging. And the rehabilitation process includes religious education, civic education, rehabilitation activities like sports, you know, and then of course life skills training, because the whole aim of the rehabilitation process is to facilitate a reintegration process. So the life skills are really key. So that brings me to the 5th pillar, which is the reintegration pillar. And that is kind of concerned with supporting individuals who've completed their rehabilitation and support their process into the community, both socially and economically. And we know from research that have been done that the process of reintegration really varies quite significantly depending on where they defected, why they defected, their clan, their relationship to the family members, their kind of experience of safety, and so on. So there's not really one size fits all in the process of reintegration. And for some, it can be quite risky, of course, because Al-Shabaab might be seeking revenge. So some choose not to go to the area where they came from, but rather integrate in a more urban setting to not have a too high profile. So that's kind of the strategy around disengagement and rehabilitation in Somalia. And what I thought would it be interesting to just touch on here would also be to kind of what is the status of disengagement and defection right now, and what might influence the defection rates. And I think it's a complex phenomenon. It's not, you know, there's not one answer, but I think it's key to say that, of course, the military situation influences. When Al-Shabaab is very strong, it's more dangerous and more difficult to defect, and it's more challenging to encourage defection because they have more financial power, they have more, you know, ways of keeping guys. Whereas when the national army is in a stronger position, there's probably more defection going on. And going back to the outreach and the communication, it's also very clear that communication play a key role in encouraging defection. In the program that I'm involved in, we are doing entry interviews when guys come into the center, and that those interviews shows us that the most effective source of communication is still radio. However, I think it's worthwhile saying the current director of the national program, he keeps emphasizing that deep in Al-Shabaab controlled areas, there is no communication. So when we design our communication efforts, we really have to think about kind of social network and family. We are communicating to people who will be able to reach the guys who are deep in the territory. So you know, it's not a simple affair, and it really requires a lot of expertise to lead that kind of work. Another effort that has contributed to a more positive situation around defection is the establishment of hotlines that guys can call, and guys meaning both security officers, government officials, clan elders, or even defectors themselves. They have a chance to call the hotlines and they can get information about the process, which is contributing to building kind of trust in the system, because the individual who's considering defecting, they really need to trust that once they defect, they will be, you know, protected in one sense or the other. So they have to trust AMISOM, they have to trust NISA, they have to trust SNA to engage in that process. And I think it's also important to say that some of the key research that has been done, like a paper by James Khalil and other colleagues, they studied why guys defect. And it came out clearly that it's a sense of disillusion. It's a sense that Al-Shabaab is not delivering on the promises that they were given. And for low-level defectors, it's in particular financial promises they were given. They say that they are really tired and they feel they are disappointed with the overall experience. And perhaps not surprising, that is very consistent with the disengagement and defection studies from all around the world. You know, people are like, guys are in these movements for a period of time and then they leave. And these reasons are very similar for Al-Shabaab as it is for other organizations. What we can also see from our entry interviews when individuals we are receiving at the center, what they say is that they know, or like it seems that they know more about the national policies right now. So it's just to emphasize that it seems to be working, that the amnesty has been established as a policy. There's still a process around making it law, but it's kind of a key element for individuals who are considering defection, that they have that policy to guide as a framework. And that's just to emphasize again, the international role is really key around supporting the process of making the amnesty into a fully comprehensive law. And in terms of how is it going with disengagement right now, I can only say from the center that I'm involved in, and I'm doing the monitoring and evaluation and research in that center, we can see that the numbers are going up. Unfortunately, we don't have a national database, or rather I don't have access to it. So I don't know if that's consistent with other centers, but at least we're seeing quite positive trends over the last 6 months. Another thing that of course contributes to encouraging defection about more than the others that I've just mentioned is also success stories. When there's a story of a defector that successfully has completed all the 5 pillars and is reintegrated and able to make a living and provide for his family, you know, that is also something that's quite powerful. So again, that's something that can be used in a communication process. Now, kind of what are the risks to disengagement and defection? Of course, it's, you know, recidivism, meaning that guys go back. And thankfully, you know, with the data that we have in terms of the follow-up, we do the post-exit interviews after they've left the center. We don't see many of them going back. And of course, I'm mindful that we might not get information from everyone, but still, I think it could indicate that once you choose to leave, it's such a dangerous decision that there's really no way back. So, so at least that's a positive thing, that we don't see so much recidivism. And another thing that is constantly on my mind is, of course, how do we measure rehabilitation? How do we know that it's working, what we are doing in the centers? And how do we know that the guys are ready for exit? And that's really something that we're all thinking about, and the social workers across the centers are mindful of. Mohamed, I have just a few more points, then I'll hand back over to you. But kind of the overall picture, I would say, is that disengagement seems to be working, and all of the major efforts are contributing to a positive situation. Research has shown recently, like International ISIS Group, a colleague of mine called Ollie Stern, and others, they have done studies on the role of women. And it seems that in order to push the defection process and disengagement to the next level, we do need to establish ways of supporting wives and also female members of Shabab, because previously it was an entirely male-dominated process. And some of the defectors, we believe that some who are considering defecting, they might be more likely to defect if they know that there's also a process for their respective partners. Yeah, so really including women in the process is key towards the future. And then we need more research on reintegration and to inform kind of best practice on that last pillar. So finally, in terms of support to the international community, it's really to contribute to making sure that all of these pillars and the different processes are managed according to international standards, but also to kind of acknowledge that it has to be sustainable within a Somali context. So it has to strike that balance. I would argue that the amnesty is really key to finalize that legal process, and the international community certainly has a strong role to play in the consultations that are required to make the current policy law. And then I would say, just before I hand back over to you, Mohamed, that what we've learned as international actors who are supporting in this process, that situations like COVID-19 really proves how important partnership is, because right now nobody can go to Mogadishu, we can't visit the centers, we can't support physically, only through online platforms like this one. So if we are not in a strong partnership and if national staff are not committed or international staff are not able to provide the support required, then we will not get very far. So flexibility is really key. And disengagement processes can only be enhanced by having a strong partnership between international and national advisors. Thank you so much.